Hi, Tony here again from all the remote things, and I've got Nick with me today, and I'm going to get your last name. It's Iovacchini.
Perfect pronunciation.
Fantastic. So we were just talking about how it's hard to get Nick's name first, and people always get my name wrong. So anybody who's on here, it is actually Ponton if you want to really impress me. So there you go. Nick, it's fantastic to have you. How about we start with the usual thing and let everybody know a little bit about yourself, so and your company, so that we're all on the first footing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Nick Iovacchini. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Kettle. We're based out of the United States. We've built a platform to really help teams and organizations operationalize hybrid work and new work models now that 9 to 5 is sort of broken, sort of answering the questions of who should be working where, when, with whom, and why, and kind of putting the pieces back together in new work models.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and that's one of the reasons that we've sort of come together. We've gravitated because obviously Remote AF is looking at many of the same themes as yourself, and as you said, your organisation is called Kettle or Kettle OS. Before we dig into that part of it, I think we've had a chat previously, and I think it's going to be really interesting for people just to hear how the company came about and how you came to this space, because I think that's an interesting journey and gives a lot of gravitas to exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, we have an interesting story. It's fairly non-linear, to say the least. For my part, I've been singing for my supper my entire career. I've been a founder across multiple different businesses, from consumer products to hospitality, and then leading up into Kettle, most recently flexible work and co-working in particular. So pre-COVID, we had a business also based in New York called Kettle Space, and that was our take on flexible co-working with an asset-light twist. So we were partnering. We were founded in 2016. My co-founder Dan came from WeWork, and he had this idea to take existing remnant space and retail assets like hotels and restaurants and event spaces that weren't being used during peak working hours and kind of repurpose that space to become asset light co-working alternatives for people that were working from home primarily. So somewhere between like coffee shop meets WeWork at a price point more like coffee shop, but a 10 times better experience, and kind of recycling space in a way that helped local businesses, freelancer wins or distributed worker, local business wins, and kind of we sit in the middle and facilitate that through technology. And that was Kettle Space. That was a business, like I said, we started in 2016. It was growing. It was going really well in early 2020, and then it was gone literally overnight in March 2020 when COVID hit New York. We were sort of in the three areas where you didn't want to be at the same time, which was hospitality, New York City, and co-working. So while it was everybody was going through their disruptive world, getting flipped upside down, reconciling with COVID at the time. So it was sort of pandemonium for everybody from a mental standpoint anyway. But for us, it was the moment where we had a thriving business on a Friday that literally was a non-existent business on a Monday. So that began what at the time was the beginning of a journey of a really meaningful pivot from a consumer workspace business with some technology enablement to what's now become a SaaS business, and really focused on really the future of work through a different lens. So when we lost our business, we had no business to operate or grow. So it was one of those interesting moments in time where you just kind of take a step back and go, well, what can we do in this moment to have an opportunity to kind of get on the other side of this big cloud of uncertainty. So what we decided to do is kind of first and foremost begin a research initiative, so that we could start to hopefully see around the corner of where some of the things were going in flexible work. And then secondly, commit to really taking the opportunity to invest in becoming a software company. Something we always had aspirations for, but didn't exactly start that way. So long story short, over the last 2 years, we've had more than 2,000 conversations, kind of have turned into customer interviews with people in organizations of all different shapes and sizes that are tasked with kind of putting these pieces back together and defining what their new work model is. And it's been interesting because the sentiment has changed substantially from the early days of like, we're going back to the office in a couple of months, no big deal, to I think maybe we're definitely going back, but we're not going back 5 days a week. We're going to agree on these specific days, to now more like, well, we're careful not to tell anybody where they have to be, and it's more choice and kind of flexibility first. So, those suite of conversations have basically informed the product that we built. As we started to get closer to the problem sets, people were telling us what's keeping them up at night. What is the leadership team saying? What's the team you're supporting saying? What's the sentiment? And kind of having our finger on the pulse started to reveal, from our perspective, some real opportunities to create software that helped kind of engineer who's working where, when, why, with whom. Questions that never really had to be answered before when we assumed everybody was back in the office. So long story short, we've kind of come through a full 180 pivot on the other side of COVID, and we've recently had our workspace business acquired, and now we're fully focused on the new software platform, Kettle OS.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and that's how we sort of came across each other. Now, I just want to, because our journeys were very similar, right? We obviously had the same thing. The organisations that we were working for were contracting in shape and size because of COVID, and that sort of spurred us on to think about remote working and the conversations, and then literally we followed that same trajectory. So it was only fate that we'd end up catching up. I want to dig deeper now into Kettle itself, because it's an interesting thing that we're going to start to talk about. But I do want to make the point, as people are listening to this is not a monitoring software, right? Because I think people immediately gravitate to, it's all about monitoring. No, we're not talking about that, right? And I love your tagline, actually. So I'm actually going to read it out. So, right, it's a platform for organizing hybrid teams. Now, you and I were just chatting before. We need a better word than hybrid, but we'll brainstorm on that in a minute. But the other part of the tagline I really love is it gives the opportunity to self-organize and find their optimal work lifestyle. So talk to me a little bit about that and Kettle in general.
Yeah, well, through the research, it was coming through pretty loud and clear that this wasn't going to be a one-size-fits-all type of solution. And we do need a better word for hybrid, but I guess we'll have to use it at least for the first part of our conversation. But, you'd talk to one company and hybrid meant something to them that was completely different than another company. They could be from the same industry, they could be the same size, but the approaches were going to be very different. And there's a lot of different variables at play. The amount of prescription or policy versus the amount of choice, who makes the choice, what's the program as it relates to what the work that needs to get done. And we started kind of picking up on through this research was that really at the team level, the atomic level being the team, that group of individuals has the best sort of handle on what amount of co-located time, synchronous time, asynchronous time they need and want to do to accomplish what they need to do, whether that's the work product that they're responsible for, or the culture that they want, or the amount of collaborative time that they need. But it could dramatically differ from team to team, department to department. So we at the time that we kind of invested in supporting that from a technology standpoint, we are able to support more of a top-down model if that's what our customers want to do, but also we are able to support teams approaching this very differently underneath the same organizational umbrella. And it's interesting now, we've seen Microsoft, PepsiCo, even Amazon announce that they're going to kind of push the decision making of how to go hybrid down to the team level, but it still creates a burden or a responsibility for that team leader who's not really hasn't had that training or doesn't necessarily know how to do that. So it can work, and we think it'll likely be one of the archetypes that emerge as a way to go hybrid, but it also requires the ability for the team to work it out for themselves. And in order to kind of remove friction, we felt like self-organizing is just kind of the natural mechanisms. Humans are really good at self-organizing with the right information. So it's just kind of let that happen as organically and kind of as close to the end user experience as possible has been our philosophy.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, right? Because humans are amazing at self-organizing, and in fact, if the system's bad, they'll find a way around it and create another system to actually supplant the system that they're working in, right? And if you've got this hybrid type thing going on, you want to give them the way to do it. We talk about to leaders a lot about, you really want to look at this close in person, place and time, right? It's close to the people, at the place where it gets done, at the time that it gets done, and organize around that. But as you said, sometimes that also comes from top down, because you do need that emphasis to allow that to happen as well, which is really great. So when we talk kettle and we talk at that level, that's great. But what is it actually? How does it work? So give us your elevator on that.
Yeah.
I think people are really interested in that, because when we spoke, I was like, oh, I get it now, and that's exactly what people are looking for. So.
Yeah, so it's a two-sided platform. It's designed to help leaders and managers work together with the members of their teams to sort of align on how they're going to go hybrid and be co-located from time to time purposefully, so that everybody gets the flexibility that we've all come to love, and the choice and the freedom that we've all benefited from. But at the same time, the teams get the value out of being co-located intentionally, so that when they're time together, when they do have time together, it counts. It's for stuff that is best done in person. So at this point, nobody wants to come into an office, put their head down at a cube and do individual contributorship and then leave. Like, we've all proven that can be done remotely. But we believe that human connection and being together in person really does have a valuable role to play, and that people are willing, most people are willing to give some of that time back, some of that flexibility back, but it's got to be done efficiently. So we're really trying to engineer purposeful experiences through our platform. And I can kind of get into sort of how that works, but a lot of quote hybrid software is really focused on booking desks, hot desking, hoteling. These are all concepts we've all heard at this point. And while we can do that, and while that is an important mechanism, the truth is, through our research, and we're a little biased, but we don't think the end user gets a whole lot of value and joy from booking a desk. They don't care. It's an added layer of bureaucracy, and like, there's no value in sitting at a seat other than maybe a good view. But what people care about, what's really underneath the hood of how to make hybrid and co-location purposeful and successful, is putting people together, the people that want to be together, making it easy for them to find one another and organize themselves so that they can be together. And like I said, for the activities that they want, whether that's mentorship, new employee onboarding, culture building, bond building, social events, collaborative setting. Those are the things that I think we all miss from sort of organically just default setting being co-located in an office. So our platform has kind of an end user experience. It's a mobile app or mobile web, which helps me, the individual employee, know where the people that I care about, my team, my boss, the person I'm mentoring, are at a given day. And in a choice environment, allows us to kind of broadcast what we're choosing. So choice is great, but it can also breed to just a lot of ambiguity. So enabling choice with clarity helps everybody kind of make plans accordingly. And then the other side of the platform is a tool for leaders to help them operationalize their approach to hybrid work. So things like, what's a rule? What's a choice? Because we're seeing some companies or teams align on, we're going to be together every Wednesday. Nobody in the office on Friday. Fine, if there's some rules. But then we also have some customers that are full choice, which is fine, as long as kind of people broadcast where they intend to be, what choice they want to make. But really, it's just kind of hybrid can be a real tangled knot. I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like the best of all worlds, but it can be a pretty tangled knot where, people can become isolated. People can show up to the office all excited. We coined a term, anticipantment, when people have a choice and they go to the office and they get all geared up, and then there's nobody there. Or the people that they wanted to connect with aren't there. And it's like, well, I could have just stayed home. So, sort of taking the new work models and putting the tools in the hands of the leaders so that they can work together with their team members, because we don't think anybody's like going to get this right out of the gate. Nobody's going to nail it. It's too new. It's too much change. It's too loaded of a kind of paradigm, but we can help folks get started. We can help gather really valuable data that they can use over time to make smarter decisions and optimize and iterate on how they're doing this. And we really think that it's going to be a lot of testing and learning over the next, decade as this starts to kind of settle in.
Yeah, I think that mix of the physical environment versus the virtual environment, right? And you bring those two together, and because people are calling that hybrid, but the reality of it is exactly what you're saying. It is a twisted knot because there's permutations of different ways, and obviously through this cast, I talk to a lot of different organisations, and I've seen a number of different permutations as you have, and you either have we're all in on a particular day, or a bunch of us are in, but some of us are home. And then I feel for leaders in that. I really do, because that's a real, how do we manage that without being, and that's why I mentioned monitoring at the beginning. How do we do that without falling into the trap of that micromanagement and that micro view and being in every single meeting, but still giving the ability to self-organize to give us that view of it. And I think that's a really good thing that you're looking at, and you're positioning yourself around. The other thing that I noted that you do that really ticked my box is one of the things I talk to people a lot about is you need to understand your people's health and your team's health. And you've built that into the platform, thinking about, I think you call it health verification, but talk to me a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so we're partnered with a company called Cleared4. They're one of the U.S. largest COVID health compliance platforms. They've done a phenomenal job of building kind of everything that you can imagine wanting to pick up and understand and sort of define as health compliance. I mean, we've all been in this world that's constantly changing, from attestations to proof of negative tests to vaccinations to whatever. But so they have a great suite of capabilities that integrates into our technology. And, I don't think anybody knows where we're going in terms of health and COVID in particular over the next few years. Hopefully we're on the other side to an extent, but we've sort of built this Maslow's hierarchy of needs of new work. And at that base level is health and safety. And, whether that's physical health vis-a-vis COVID or psychological safety, which we all know is incredibly important in work, kind of up to the middle levels of operationalizing these new complexities, like you were saying, and creating tools and structures for leaders and employees to come together in an organized way, self-organized or programmatic. And then at the top of that pyramid, borrowing kind of from the Maslow's pyramid of needs, is that enlightenment, which for us is like a good work lifestyle balance and time together that's purposeful and good culture and sort of, the softer elements of all this. But it does all kind of ladder up. And I think health and safety is at this point now kind of at the base of that pyramid.
Yeah, and I think if you don't take that into account, so you can put all the other things we just talked about around it, but if you don't take that into account, that's a very big building block, because you can have some really unhappy people and some really very unhealthy environment, regardless of the fact that it's remote or hybrid, right? So that doesn't change in your organization, but it becomes harder to understand when you distribute your workforce. Not that it's you're unable to deal with it, but you need to think about it and purposely design for it, and that's the thing that we talk about a lot. I wanted to get a little bit deeper on what you're seeing now, right? So we've talked a bit about the platform, but you said you've done about 2,000 odd interviews, and you're continuing to talk to different organisations and companies. So I think that's the insight that I'd like to sort of plumb into a little bit more with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of where we're going and the challenges that people are seeing?
Yeah, well, it's been really fascinating to have these conversations progress over the last 2 years because it's absolutely been a progression. Like, we're going back in a couple months to we're going to mandate not all the time in the office to more of kind of this liberal, progressive way of thinking about choice in people's time. But I think kind of when, at least in the United States, when Delta and Omicron hit, they hit at this time where we were gearing up for this ceremonious return to office in quotes, fall 2021. It's like, okay, guys, we've been at this a year and a half. Everybody, many people have vaccinations, and like we're ready to go back to the office, and it's going to look like this on this date with this plan. And then just when people were gearing up for it, then here comes Delta and here comes Omicron, and it's like, nope. Like that's like the fourth or fifth time everybody made this ceremonious plan just to have it kind of, wiped out by COVID. So I think what the current conversation and what we're hearing consistently is, flexible work is here to stay. Like we've already seen, we're great resignation, whatever we're going to call it. People are valuing flexibility and basically their own time and having agency over their own time on par or even greater than salary in some situations. So it's like that's not going back to the way it was. And we've seen as companies try to be more prescriptive and or big brothery about it, then there's been a lashback. And I think a lot of that is there's been a power dynamic shift between, as long as there was worker and boss forever, boss could tell worker when and where to be. And if you want that job, that's what you have to do. But now I think we've all questioned that at this point. It's like, wait a minute, life went on, work went on. We thrived, we grew, whatever, we were productive. And I didn't have to be where I was told I needed to be. And so I think the power has shifted to the people. And as a result, it's becoming clearer and clearer to leadership teams that they need to embrace that, or the talent's gonna tilt away from them. And you see it. You see it happening already. And I think one of the interesting things about it is that the people who are making these decisions, the leadership team, they're also people who've also changed. And somebody gave me an interesting stat recently, and I wish I had it crisp, but it was something to the effect of a survey of what leadership thought, how leadership thought the last 2 years impacted culture was dramatically worse than how the actual end employee. I
Yeah.
wish I had the stat, but meaning leadership is kind of over indexing on needing to be together more, and people have already said like, no, this is good, I'm healthier, this is better for me. So I do think that it's going to be a new equilibrium that gets established, and everybody's kind of come to the middle a little bit, or go fully remote, and that has its pros and cons too. But for those that are endeavoring to kind of have their cake and eat it too, um, it's going to be much more skewing towards choice and flexibility, which is what people want, but without organization in some way. We've been saying recently that through what we've been hearing, transparency is a new currency that's being traded between like
Absolutely.
organization and employee. And, I think that that's going to be critical. And how do you do that in a way that feels good for everybody is still sort of getting figured out, because you don't want to have monitoring big brother. But at the same time, what's interesting is organizations have known, if they want, they have the information to know where people are working from just from their IP addresses and their company computers. So it's not actually a new thing that organizations have visibility to where people are. It's just, I think it's more of a culture and a change management consideration of how that's communicated and why that's important. But a lot to still be kind of figured out. The other thing that keeps coming up for us is the implications of DEIB, and how that is going to be related to hybrid work, because not everybody has the same situation at home. Not everybody, you've got difference in generations, and people
Yes.
with young kids like mine, like we probably want to be home a little more. Younger generations, we have some cool research from Gen Z. They definitely want to be in the office more. And, does that create inequalities? Are there different, that in and of itself is going to be a pretty complex relationship that needs to get sorted out.
Yeah, I think that's a big one that people discount. I love that transparency is the new currency tag, and that's a great line because that is so true for organisations. And we talk a lot to leadership around that as well, because I think you've hit the nail on the head there. For leadership, they're seeing it from a different perspective because they've always had to cluster management, right? And now this is a change. So it is a change to leadership style, whether it's hybrid, whether you go fully remote, that leadership are going to have to adjust, and so the tools that they use are going to adjust, and the way that they think about how everybody's working is going to adjust as well. So I think that's a really poignant point that you're putting there. And then if you add the secondary piece in there, we have a saying that your home is in your work and your work is in your home now. So that's where you have to have that flexible choices, but you also have to have a lot of conversation, and that's why I was very chuffed about the health thing, because that plays into that as well, right? We have a responsibility now to think about that, even from HR standpoints, and I'm sure you're seeing some of that. People experience human resources, whatever you want to call that piece, in whatever country. Everybody's got different words for it, but the reality of it is it switches up to, all right, well, all these people are at home, but are they set up right? What's their office like, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, this may have come up in one of our conversations at some point, but LinkedIn announced in December, or in the month of December, 10,000 new jobs were created that had the title of head of employee experience, or head of employee engagement, or head of future of work, or head of hybrid work. I mean, that's 10,000 jobs in a month being created from scratch. And I think that's a testament to what you just said, which is like, there has to be some commitment of internal resources. I think the perfect kind of alignment of how to solve for this transformation effectively is an internal commitment of resources and time and expertise to be fully committed to solving these things. They're not like black and white, solve them in a day kinds of problems. A technology solution like ours and others that kind of help bring technology efficiencies to how to collaborate and how to balance these new considerations most effectively, not just the ones that look like ours, but payroll considerations, digital collaboration tools, Zoom, Slack, all that kind of stuff. And then I really think consultants are a big part of a healthy solution too, because the community that you guys have built, and we're connected with a lot of really high quality consultants as well. This takes some framework, and it really benefits, in my opinion, from rather than having an organization and kind of throwing them to the fire and having this be the first time that there's no playbook for anybody. There actually are playbooks out here, and there are good frameworks. Yeah. And, being able to kind of leverage technology plus consultants plus internal advocacy to reassemble this, in my opinion, is kind of the right recipe to approach this, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. You said playbook. There's playbooks out there, but the thing that we talk about is you have to design for the context of your organization, because there's so many permutations of this, as you rightly brought up before, of the remote versus the hybrid versus the in between those, and each organization has its own different permutation of that. Like obviously, like yourself, I talk to lots of organizations, and there's those ones that have actually gone, we're going to go fully remote. We're going to give our people, a stipend to actually make sure that their office is set up properly and get them the right desks and do that kind of thing. There was an organization I was just talking to yesterday who not only does that, but interesting take on it was literally saying, if we don't spend money on real estate, then we've got more money to spend on this. And they even go to the point where they bring all their employees together. They're obviously not a huge enterprise, but they're not small either, but they bring together in a place in the world once a quarter. They pay for stay in hotels, right? But they get that human connection happening for a week.
Yeah.
And then everybody goes away, and they go back, and they've got those connections that they can talk through as well. So there's so many permutations. There's no right or wrong way here at the moment. Well, there's lots of wrong ways, I should say. but there's no absolute. You said no one's going to nail this straight out of the gate. And I think the bottom line with that is that they're not going to nail that straight out of the gate because it's different for every organization. So therefore, you have to design it to the context. There's frameworks, there's tools such as yourself, and there's things to be thought around that. However, you're not going to get it exactly the same as the organization over there.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're right. And we spent a lot of time in our legacy workspace business focused on connection in particular. If you'd have met me pre-COVID, I would have told you it's not about the space. It's about what happens when people connect and have a great experience in the space. They make friends, they trade business, we're lonely working from home, whatever the case may be. And we actually studied a lot of Vivek Murthy, who's Surgeon General. He was studying the loneliness or connection, two sides of the same coin, in work. And there's some research out there that, having at least one friend at work, I don't know if you're familiar with this, is like one of the most impactful things determining how long people stay in a job. But I do think that whether you gather for a week in a hotel, and we call that the episodic gathering model, or it's one day a week or 2 days a week, in when possible, really getting together for those in-person activities. We can all feel it. We can physically feel it. Humans by nature are community-based creatures that, instinctually want to be together physically. So I do think that that'll be a big part of the future of work, even for companies that go fully remote. How are we going to think about, well, most of the time we're not together and we live in a two-dimensional, potentially asynchronous way, but how do you sometimes get into the three-dimensional world? I think it will be more and more of an intentional, it has to be more and more of an intentional exercise. We all took it for granted because we were just 9 to 5 stuck together. So anyway, one of the more fascinating things that will be evolving.
Yeah, I think it's a landscape we're going to be watching, and so then that brings me to, because we're very close to the end of our time, but you and I jokingly had a conversation off air around hybrid, and we need to get a better word. And I don't think you and I are going to come up. Well, maybe we will, but what I would say to anyone who's watching this cast, feel free to throw in the comments any thoughts about what we could use instead of hybrid, because we're keen to hear.
We need a new word for sure.
Yeah, and then we can have a workshop on that, because I think as this evolves, we're going to need something to describe it, and nothing really describes it perfectly at the moment.
Yeah, and hybrid just means so many different things. You have hybrid cars, you have hybrid. Yeah, I mean it's too general. And we had co-working, which had a pretty specific meaning. The term co-locating comes up a lot, but some people, it's a new term for people. I feel like the word purposeful or intentional will probably start to creep into the vernacular somewhere, because I think we all want to be together. We just don't want to trade our time for experiences that aren't compelling and that, we can't get like this.
Yeah. We're very, very close to the end of our time. So it's been a pleasure to have you on, Nick, all the way from New York, which is really quite interesting. We're talking about the right space here I am sitting in Australia, etc. How can people get involved or find more about Kettle and what you're doing with the platform?
Yeah, you can check our website out. It's www.kettleos.com, or feel free to email me directly. My email address is nick@kettleos.com. I'm on LinkedIn. If I can be helpful to anybody as thought partner or however, I love this stuff. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Look, if you're listening to this, please don't forget, if you like this episode, to like, subscribe, amplify, join our new Remote AF community. You can find us on Circle, or you can just go to remoteaf.co and you can click on the community button and join us. Nick's there. We have a lot of people coming into that community, so we're very passionate about it. It's been a fantastic time having you on all the remote things, Nick. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ponton.
Thank you. Cheers.